The desert sun blazed mercilessly over Nellis Air Force Base as Lieutenant Jessica Jinx Rodriguez taxied her F-16 toward the flight line. The aircraft looked wrong somehow, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit with the other sleek Vipers. Lined up in perfect formation, where the other Fighting Falcons gleamed with fresh paint and pristine maintenance, hers bore the scars of decades in service, faded gray camouflage, patches over old stress cracks, and serial numbers that dated back to the Reagan administration. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jesus, Rodriguez, did you pull that thing out of the boneyard? Captain Derek Morrison's voice crackled through the squadron frequency, his tone dripping with the casual cruelty that came naturally to those born into military dynasties. His own F-16 sat 2 spots down, a Block 52 variant fresh from the factory with all the latest upgrades, advanced radar, digital flight controls, and avionics that cost more than most people's houses. Jessica ran her gloved hand along the worn stick grip, feeling the texture of countless hours under the hands of pilots who had flown this bird through 3 decades of service. The aircraft had seen combat over Iraq, patrol missions along the Korean DMZ, and training flights across every major desert and mountain range in the continental United States. Now it was her mount for completing the most demanding phase of fighter pilot training. The F-16C Block 25 had been built in 1987, making it older than Jessica herself. While her classmates flew aircraft equipped with ESA radars, advanced targeting pods, and fly-by-wire systems refined through decades of development, her Viper relied on technology that was cutting edge when Top Gun was still in theaters. The radar was analog, the displays were green monochrome, and the flight control computer had less processing power than a modern smartphone. "At least it flies," she muttered into her oxygen mask, running through her pre-takeoff checks with a methodical precision drilled into her through months of training. The engine parameters looked good, hydraulics showed normal pressure, and the ancient IN system had finally aligned after 20 minutes of patient waiting. "Does it though?" Lieutenant Amy Chun's voice joined the frequency, her F-16D trainer, gleaming with the confidence that came from having a wealthy defense contractor for a father. As the daughter of Chun Aerospace's CEO, Amy had never known anything but the newest, most advanced military hardware. "I heard maintenance had to cannibalize parts from 3 other jets just to get that museum piece airworthy." A chorus of laughter echoed through the radio as other members of the 414th Fighter Training Squadron checked in for the morning's exercise. Jessica could see them through her canopy, a collection of America's finest young pilots, each one handpicked from thousands of applicants and trained at enormous expense to fly the world's most advanced fighter aircraft. They came from military academies, prestigious universities, and families with connections reaching deep into the Pentagon's corridors of power. Then there was Jessica Rodriguez, daughter of a retired Air Force mechanic who had spent 30 years keeping older aircraft flying on shoestring budgets. She had earned her commission through ROTC at a state university, paid for with scholarships, part-time jobs, and a determination that her instructors had described as exceptional and her classmates had labeled as obsessive. "Attention, Viper. Flight," the voice of Colonel Patricia Hayes cut through the chatter with the authority of someone who had logged over 4,000 hours in fighters, including combat missions over Afghanistan and Syria. As commanding officer of the 414th, she had seen hundreds of young pilots attempt to master the demanding art of air-to-air combat. Today's exercise is advanced beyond visual range intercept tactics. You'll be facing simulated threats in a complex electronic warfare environment. Jessica's stomach tightened as she absorbed the briefing details. BVR combat was the most technically demanding aspect of modern air warfare, requiring pilots to manage multiple radar contacts, coordinate with AWACS controllers, and make split-second decisions about weapon employment, all while flying at supersonic speeds and dealing with electronic jamming that could blind their sensors. Her F-16's a PG-66 radar was a capable system for its time, but it lacked the range and discrimination capability of the newer PG-80 AESA radars in the other aircraft. While her classmates could detect and track targets at ranges exceeding 100 miles, she would be limited to perhaps 60 miles under ideal conditions. In a contested environment with jamming and chaff, that disadvantage could be fatal. Additionally, Colonel Hayes continued, this exercise will count for 30% of your final qualification score. Those who fail to demonstrate acceptable performance will be eliminated from the fighter, track and reassigned to transport or tanker aircraft. The flight line fell silent except for the distant whine of turbine engines and the constant desert wind that carried the scent of jet fuel and hot metal. Jessica felt 20 pairs of eyes turn toward her aircraft, and she knew exactly what her classmates were thinking. The girl with the ancient F-16 was about to wash out spectacularly, probably taking a few innocent pilots with her, when the obsolete radar finally gave up entirely. Captain Morrison's voice returned to the frequency, pitched low enough that only she could hear clearly. You know, Rodriguez, there's no shame in requesting a transfer to the mobility track now. Save yourself the embarrassment. The Air Force needs good transport pilots, and you wouldn't have to worry about keeping up with modern fighters. Jessica keyed her mic with deliberate calm. Thanks for the career advice, Morrison. I'll keep it in mind when you're explaining to your daddy why the family tradition of fighter pilots ended with you. She could see his helmet snap toward her aircraft, even from 300 yards away. The Morrison family had produced fighter pilots for 3 generations, including a grandfather who had flown P-51s in World War II and a father who had commanded an F-15 squadron during Desert Storm. Derek Morrison had grown up assuming he would continue that legacy, and he didn't appreciate reminders that legacy didn't guarantee success. Before he could respond, Colonel Hayes was calling for engine start. Jessica reached for the JFS switch, beginning the familiar ritual that would bring her ancient Viper to life. The jet fuel starter spooled up with a characteristic whine, providing the compressed air needed to light off the main engine. The Pratt & Whitney F-100 turbofan was the same basic design used in every F-16, regardless of age, and it fired up with the reliable authority that had made the Fighting Falcon one of the most successful fighter designs in aviation history. As her engine settled into idle, Jessica ran through her systems checks with practiced efficiency. The older aircraft required more attention than the newer models. Manual checks of systems that were automated in later variants, careful monitoring of analog gauges that could reveal problems before they became critical, and a deeper understanding of the aircraft's mechanical systems. Tower, Viper flight ready for taxi, Colonel Hayes announced from the lead aircraft. Flight of 8, requesting runway 21 for departure. Viper flight, taxi to runway 21 via taxiway Alpha. Winds 200 at 15, gusts 225, altimeter 3002. The formation began moving toward the active runway. 8 F-16s in a loose line that represented months of training and millions of dollars in aircraft and equipment. Jessica fell into position as Viper 7, her ancient fighter fitting into the formation despite its obvious age and wear. From a distance, the differences weren't immediately apparent. All F-16s shared the same basic configuration, the distinctive bubble canopy and swept wings that had made the type instantly recognizable for 4 decades. Jessica knew that appearances could be deceiving. While her classmates' aircraft bristled with electronic systems designed to provide every possible advantage in combat, her F-16 represented a different philosophy, one that emphasized pilot skill over technological superiority. In the hands of a capable pilot, the older Viper could still be deadly effective. assuming the pilot was willing to work harder and think more creatively than opponents with newer equipment. As they approached the runway, Jessica caught sight of the ground crews who had prepared her aircraft for flight. Unlike the specialists who maintained the newer F-16s, her crew chief was Senior Master Sergeant Carlos Mendez, a 30-year veteran who had worked on Block 25 Vipers since they were new. He understood every quirk and characteristic of the older aircraft, and he had personally overseen every maintenance action performed on Jessica's jet. "Viper 7, you're cleared for takeoff," the tower controller announced as Jessica rolled into position on the runway. Through her HUD, she could see the other aircraft already airborne, climbing toward the training area where they would face simulated threats designed to test every aspect of their skills. Jessica advanced the throttle to military power, feeling the familiar surge of acceleration as the F-100 engine pushed her F-16 down the runway. At 140 knots, she rotated smoothly, and the ancient fighter leaped into the desert sky with the same eager energy it had displayed for 37 years of service. As she joined the formation, climbing toward 25,000 feet, Jessica reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. Her father, Technical Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez, had spent his career maintaining 10 Warthogs and F-16s at bases across the American Southwest. He had taught her that newer didn't always mean better, that understanding your equipment intimately was more important than having the latest gadgets, and that skilled maintenance could keep older aircraft performing at levels that amazed pilots. Accustomed to newer machines, those lessons had served her well through undergraduate pilot training, where her careful preparation and attention to detail had compensated for her lack of natural flying ability. While some of her classmates seemed to absorb complex procedures effortlessly, Jessica had studied harder, practiced longer, and approached every flight with a level of preparation that her instructors found impressive and her peers found slightly obsessive. Now, strapped into an F-16 that predated the internet, she was about to face the most challenging phase of her training. The exercise ahead would test not just her ability to operate the aircraft, but her capacity to think tactically, manage multiple threats, and make the kind of split-second decisions that separated competent pilots from exceptional ones. Viper. Flight. Contact range control on frequency 248.7. Colonel Hayes announced as they approached the training area. "Remember, this is a graded exercise. Fly smart, communicate clearly, and use your systems effectively." Jessica switched frequencies and checked in with range control, receiving vectors toward the initial point where the exercise would begin. Around her, the other F-16s maintained perfect formation, their pilots no doubt reviewing procedures and mentally preparing for the challenges ahead. She knew that her classmates expected her to struggle, possibly even fail. The combination of older equipment and her reputation as someone who had to work harder than others for every achievement made her an obvious candidate for elimination. But Jessica had learned something during her years of preparation that her more naturally gifted classmates might have missed. Sometimes the biggest disadvantage could become an unexpected advantage if you were willing to work hard enough to master it completely. The exercise area stretched ahead, empty desert punctuated by mountain ranges and dry lakes that would serve as navigation references during the coming engagement. Somewhere out there, simulated enemy aircraft were waiting, along with electronic warfare threats designed to challenge every system on their aircraft. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. For her classmates flying newer F-16s, this would be a test of their ability to employ advanced technology effectively. For Jessica, flying a fighter that was older than she was, it would be something else entirely, a chance to prove that skill. Determination and intimate knowledge of your aircraft could overcome almost any technological disadvantage. As Viper flight approached the initial point and prepared to begin the most demanding exercise of their training, Jessica Rodriguez made a silent promise to her ancient F-16 and to herself. Today, they would show everyone what an old fighter and a determined pilot could accomplish when underestimated by their opponents. The Nevada Test and Training Range stretched endlessly below Viper flight as they reached their assigned altitude of 25,000 feet. The morning sun cast long shadows across the desert floor, creating a patchwork of light and dark that would challenge visual acquisition of targets later in the exercise. Jessica checked her Ian's position against the GPS readout, one of the few modern additions to her aging F-16, and confirmed they were approaching the initial point on schedule. Viper flight, this is Darkstar. The AWACS controller's voice crackled through her headset. The E-3 Sentry was orbiting somewhere to the south, its massive rotating radar dome scanning hundreds of square miles of airspace for the simulated enemy aircraft that would serve as today's adversaries. Be advised, we're showing multiple contacts. Bearing 045, range 90 miles, altitude unknown. Threat assessment indicates advanced fighters with look-down, shoot-down capability. Jessica felt her pulse quicken. Advanced fighters met aircraft equipped with modern radars and long-range missiles. Exactly the kind of opponents that would exploit every limitation of her older F-16, while her classmates' AESA radars could begin tracking targets at extreme range. Her PG-66 would need to get much closer before it could achieve a reliable lock. Darkstar Viper lead. Colonel Hayes responded from the front of the formation. Request picture and threat axis. Viper lead Darkstar. The picture shows 4 groups, each consisting of 2 contacts. Groups Alpha and Bravo are maintaining station. At Angels 30, groups Charlie and Delta appear to be descending. All groups are in a defensive posture approximately 20 miles apart in a line abreast formation. 8 enemy aircraft. Jessica did the math quickly. Viper flight had 8 F-16s, making this a 1-to-1 engagement that would test individual pilot skills rather than tactical coordination. But something about the setup bothered her. Defensive formations usually indicated the enemy was waiting for something, possibly additional friendly forces or a specific trigger event. Viper flight, fence in, Colonel Hayes commanded, using the brevity code that meant all aircraft should activate their combat systems. Master arm on, radar to combat mode. Remember your training and trust your equipment. Jessica flipped the master arm switch and selected combat mode on her radar. The PG-66 immediately began scanning the airspace ahead, its mechanical antenna sweeping back and forth in search of hostile contacts. The scope remained stubbornly empty. She was still too far away for her older radar to detect targets that the IWACS could see clearly around her. The other F-16s began spreading out into combat formation, each pilot maneuvering to optimize their radar coverage and missile engagement geometry. Jessica could hear fragments of radio calls as her classmates began detecting and tracking the simulated enemy aircraft with their advanced sensors. Viper 3 has contact, bearing 048, 42 miles. Viper 5 contact 051 at 38 miles. Viper 6 has multiple contacts, designating it as hostile. The radio chatter continued as pilot after pilot achieved radar contact and began the complex process of target identification and engagement prioritization. Jessica maintained her heading and altitude, waiting for her radar to detect something, anything, that would allow her to contribute to the engagement. Then her RWR lit up like a Christmas tree. The radar warning receiver suddenly displayed multiple threat symbols indicating that enemy radars were actively scanning her aircraft. But these weren't the simulated threats she had expected from the exercise scenario. The symbols showed advanced look-down radars operating on frequencies that didn't match any aircraft in the Air Force inventory. Viper 7 Darkstar. The AWACS controller's voice carried an edge of concern. We're showing additional contacts bearing 180, range 60 miles fast movers. These contacts are not part of the scheduled exercise. Jessica's blood went cold. Additional contacts from the south meant unidentified aircraft had entered the training airspace during an active exercise. Protocol demanded immediate identification and potential intercept, but her classmates were already engaged with the plan. Adversaries to the north. Darkstar, Viper 7, she transmitted, making a decision that would change everything. Request vectors to intercept southern contacts. I have defensive counter-air capability and am closest to the threat axis. Viper 7, Darkstar, negative on intercept clearance. Maintain current position and await instructions from Viper lead. But Colonel Hayes was busy coordinating the engagement with the northern threat groups, and Jessica could see on her RWR that the southern contacts were closing rapidly. Whatever aircraft were approaching from the south, they were moving fast and appeared to be equipped with sophisticated electronic warfare systems that were beginning to jam the AWACS radar. Darkstar Viper 7, the southern contacts are jamming your radar. I'm the only aircraft with a clear picture of their approach vector. It was true. Her position at the rear of Viper flight and her older radar's different operating frequency meant she was less affected by the electronic jamming than the more modern systems. Sometimes obsolete technology has unexpected advantages. Viper 7, this is General Morrison. The voice that came through her headset made Jessica's heart skip. General Robert Morrison, Derek's father and commanding general of the entire warfare center, was apparently monitoring the exercise from somewhere in the command post. His presence meant this was more than a routine training flight. Sir, Viper 7 here. Lieutenant Rodriguez, I want you to understand something very clearly. Those southern contacts represent a significant security threat to this installation. They've penetrated restricted airspace during a classified exercise, and they're actively jamming our surveillance systems. Under no circumstances are you to engage without explicit authorization. Jessica felt the weight of command authority, but her tactical training was screaming warnings. The unidentified aircraft were less than 50 miles away and closing fast. In fighter combat, 50 miles was practically knife-fighting range. General Morrison, sir, what if they demonstrate hostile intent? Rules of engagement authorize defensive measures if threatened. Lieutenant, you will maintain position and await orders. That is final. The radio went silent, but Jessica's R-Rover continued painting threat symbols as the unknown aircraft approached. She could see her classmates were fully engaged with the northern threats, their attention focused on the planned exercise scenario. None of them were watching the southern approach, and the AWACS was increasingly unable to track the jamming contacts. That's when her ancient F-16 radar finally detected something that made her blood run cold. 6 distinct contacts flying in perfect formation, approaching Mach 1.2 from the south. But these weren't Air Force aircraft or even recognizable foreign fighters. The radar returns showed aircraft with unusual signatures, too small for bombers, too large for traditional fighters, and moving in a coordination pattern that suggested advanced tactical training. Darkstar, Viper 7. I have 6 contacts, bearing 175, range 32 miles, speed 680 knots. They're in tactical formation and appear to be maneuvering for intercept of Viper flight. Viper 7, Darkstar. We cannot confirm those contacts due to heavy jamming. Maintain position. Jessica watched the contacts continue their approach, and her tactical training kicked in. 6 aircraft in formation, moving at high speed toward an active training exercise while actively jamming military radar systems. There was only one reasonable interpretation. This was either a very sophisticated adversary exercise that hadn't been briefed, or something much more serious. Her decision was made when the lead contact suddenly accelerated and began climbing toward Viper flight's altitude. The maneuver was clearly aggressive, designed to achieve an advantageous position for missile engagement. Jessica had perhaps 3 minutes before the unknown aircraft would be in the weapons range of her classmates, who were still focused on the northern threats. "Viper 7 is breaking south to investigate," she transmitted, pushing her throttle to military power and banking her F-16 toward the approaching contacts. "I have visual responsibility for the southern threat axis. Viper 7, negative." General Morrison's voice exploded through the radio. "Return to formation immediately." But Jessica was already committed to the intercept, her older F-16 accelerating toward a confrontation with 6 unknown aircraft that had penetrated one of the most secure training areas in the United States. As she closed the distance, her radar began resolving more details about the contacts, and what she saw made her question everything she thought she knew about the exercise. The aircraft showed stealth, characteristics that shouldn't exist in any foreign inventory, combined with flight patterns that suggested artificial intelligence guidance rather than human pilots. Whatever was approaching Viper flight, it represented technology that was either highly classified American equipment or something that posed a significant threat to national security. Darkstar, Viper 7, the southern contacts are exhibiting stealth characteristics and appear to be unmanned. Request immediate backup and weapons authorization. Viper 7, all stations. This is Colonel Hayes. Return to formation immediately. You are compromising the exercise scenario. Jessica checked her fuel and weapon status as she continued south toward the unknown contacts. Her F-16 carried 2 AIM-12 AMRAAM missiles and 2 AIM-9 Sidewinders, a standard air-to-air load that would be adequate against conventional threats. But if these contacts represented some kind of advanced drone technology, traditional missile engagement might be ineffective. Viper 7, this is Tech Sergeant Williams in range control. The voice was quiet, almost conspiratorial. Be advised, those southern contacts appeared on our screens 12 minutes ago from outside our surveillance coverage. They were not part of the planned exercise scenario, and their point of origin is unknown. The confirmation hit Jessica like a physical blow. These weren't part of the training exercise. 6 unknown aircraft had somehow penetrated the most secure airspace in the continental United States, and her classmates were about to be caught completely off guard while engaged with simulated threats. As she closed to 20 miles from the lead contact, Jessica's RWR suddenly went quiet. The jamming had stopped, but now her radar was painting missile launch warnings from multiple directions. The unknown aircraft weren't just approaching. They were actively targeting Viper flight with what appeared to be long-range, air-to-air missiles. All Viper aircraft, this is Viper 7, break north immediately. Multiple missile launches from the southern threat axis. This is not an exercise. The radio erupted in confusion as pilots tried to understand what was happening. Some began defensive maneuvers, while others continued their engagement with the northern contacts, unsure whether Jessica's warning was real or part of the exercise scenario. Viper 7, General Morrison. You are ordered to cease all tactical communications and return to base immediately. You are interfering with a classified exercise. But Jessica could see missile contrails in the clear desert air, white streaks climbing toward her classmates who were still trying to figure out whether they were facing a real threat or an unusually realistic simulation. Her ancient F-16 might not have the latest technology, but it had something her classmates' modern fighters couldn't provide. A pilot who was willing to make the hard decisions when command authority failed to act. Viper flight, this is Viper 7. Missiles in the air from southern contacts. Recommend immediate defensive maneuvers and weapons-free authorization. As the first AMRAAM missiles reached their terminal guidance phase and began homing on the surprised F-16s of Viper flight, Jessica Rodriguez made a decision that would define her entire career. Her obsolete fighter might be outgunned and outnumbered, but she was the only pilot in position to intercept 6 hostile aircraft that had somehow penetrated American airspace undetected. The real fight was about to begin, and everything she had learned about air combat was about to be tested against an enemy that shouldn't exist. Jessica's F-16 screamed through the thin desert air at 480 knots. Her ancient fighter surprisingly responsive as she maneuvered toward an intercept with the lead unknown aircraft. Behind her, chaos erupted across the radio frequencies as Viper Flight finally understood they were facing real missiles fired by real adversaries. "Break right! Break right!" Captain Morrison's voice cracked with panic as an AMRAAM missile closed on his position. Where the hell did that come from? Viper 3 is defending south. Lieutenant Chun reported her F-16 pulling into a defensive turn that bled airspeed rapidly. "I've got lock-on warnings from multiple directions. All Viper aircraft, this is Colonel Hayes, weapons free. Engage hostile aircraft with extreme prejudice." But the colonel's authorization came too late for coordinated defense. The unknown aircraft had achieved complete tactical surprise, launching their initial salvo while Viper Flight was focused entirely on the simulated northern threats. Jessica watched through her HUD as missile contrails crisscrossed the sky. Her classmates scattered across 50 miles of airspace and fighting individual battles for survival. "Viper 7, this is Viper 4. Lieutenant Jake Thompson's voice was tight with stress, but professionally calm. "I've got you on scope, bearing 180. Are you engaging southern contacts alone?" "Affirmative, Viper 4. I'm closest to the threat axis and have the best situational awareness." "Roger that." Viper 4 is Winchester on the northern group, but can provide backup in 2 minutes. Jessica appreciated the offer, but 2 minutes in air combat was a lifetime. The lead unknown aircraft was now 15 miles away and closing rapidly, its radar signature unlike anything she'd studied in threat identification classes. The contact appeared and disappeared from her scope in patterns that suggested advanced stealth technology combined with sophisticated electronic countermeasures. Her RWR suddenly painted a new symbol: missile launch warning from the lead contact. Jessica immediately broke hard left, pulling 5 Gs as she maneuvered to defeat the incoming missile. The unknown aircraft had fired from maximum range, probably testing her reactions and defensive capabilities. "Viper 7 is defending," she transmitted, rolling inverted and pulling through to reverse her heading. The missile passed harmlessly behind her, its seeker head apparently confused by her abrupt maneuver change. As she completed the defensive turn, Jessica caught sight of something that made her tactical situation much worse. The 6 unknown aircraft weren't operating independently. They were functioning as a coordinated unit with overlapping radar, coverage, and mutual support. As she evaded the first missile, 2 more contacts maneuvered to bracket her escape route. "Darkstar, Viper 7. Request immediate picture of Southern Threat Group. I'm engaged with multiple hostiles and need tactical coordination." "Viper 7, Darkstar. We're still experiencing heavy jamming from southern contacts. Best picture shows 6 aircraft in loose tactical formation, but we cannot provide detailed targeting information." Jessica was on her own, facing 6 advanced aircraft with her 37-year-old F-16 and rapidly diminishing tactical options. Her fuel was burning quickly at military power, her missile load was limited, and the enemy had both numerical and technological superiority. But her father had taught her something during those long afternoons in the maintenance hangar, when you can't match your opponent's technology, you have to outthink them. These unknown aircraft might have stealth capability and advanced weapons, but they were operating in patterns that suggested artificial intelligence guidance rather than human intuition. "Viper 7, Fox 1. Jessica fired her first AIM 120 at the lead contact, using a head-on engagement geometry that would force the enemy aircraft to defend rather than attack. The AMRAAM guided flawlessly, its active radar seeker painting the target at 10 miles. The unknown aircraft's response confirmed her suspicions about AI guidance. Instead of the creative, unpredictable defensive maneuvers a human pilot might use, the contact executed a textbook defensive pattern, effective but predictable. Jessica's missile missed by mere feet, but the engagement forced the lead aircraft to break off its attack run. "Good hit, Viper 7. Thompson's voice carried. Across the radio, Splash 1 northern contact. Viper 4 is moving to support. But before Thompson could reach her position, Jessica found herself in serious trouble. The remaining 5 unknown aircraft had used her engagement with the leader to position themselves for a coordinated attack. Her RWR showed multiple lock-on warnings from different directions, and she realized she was about to face the fighter pilot's worst nightmare, being outnumbered with no escape route. Viper 7, notch right and dive. Colonel Hayes' voice cut through the tactical frequency. Use the terrain for masking. Jessica didn't hesitate. She rolled inverted and pulled toward the desert floor, using the F-16 superior low-altitude handling to get below the enemy radar horizon. At 500 feet above the ground, flying at 520 knots, she was safely hidden from the enemy's look-down radars, but also completely committed to a dangerous game of terrain. Following at speeds that left no margin for error, the desert floor rushed past in a blur of browns and tans, broken by occasional mesas and dry creek beds that forced constant maneuvering to avoid ground impact. Jessica's ancient F-16 handled the low-level environment beautifully, its mechanically controlled flight surfaces providing the kind of precise feedback that modern fly-by-wire systems sometimes filtered out. Viper 7, this is Tech Sergeant Williams again. The range controller's voice was barely audible through the static generated by her low altitude. We're tracking your position on ground radar. Be advised, those unknown contacts are maintaining altitude and appear to be searching for you. Jessica checked her fuel gauge and felt her stomach drop. The high-speed, low-altitude flight was consuming fuel at an alarming rate. She had perhaps 10 minutes of flight time remaining at this power setting, not enough to reach the tanker tracks, or even return to base. Range control, Viper 7. Request immediate fuel state and recovery options. Viper 7, closest recovery field is Creech Air Force Base, bearing 270, 42 miles. But you'll need to climb to clear the intervening terrain. Climbing meant exposing herself to the unknown aircraft still searching for her position. Jessica weighed her options: stay low and run out of fuel over the desert, or climb and face 5 advanced fighters with her remaining weapons. The decision was made for her when her RWR lit up with multiple threat warnings. The unknown aircraft had somehow detected her position despite the terrain masking, and they were diving to engage her at low altitude. Viper 7 is taking fire. Jessica pulled hard right as cannon rounds stitched across the desert floor where her F-16 had been. Seconds before, she caught a glimpse of one of the unknown aircraft, sleek, angular, and definitely not in any recognition manual she'd studied. Viper 7, Viper 4. I'm overhead at Angels 25. Can you give me a vector to the hostiles? Viper 4, they're down low with me. Bearing 090 from my position, approximately 2 miles. Jessica rolled left and pulled up sharply, trading her precious altitude for separation from the attacking aircraft. As she climbed through 2,000 feet, she saw Thompson's F-16 diving toward the furball, his AIM-120 already in flight toward one of the enemy contacts. Viper 4, Fox 1, engaging southern hostility. The AMRAAM guided true, impacting one of the unknown aircraft in a brilliant fireball that confirmed these weren't just sophisticated drones. The explosion scattered debris across several square Miles of desert, and Jessica caught sight of wreckage that looked distinctly non-American in origin. Splash 1 hostile. Thompson reported. Viper 7, I count 4 remaining bandits maneuvering for re-engagement. 4 against 2 with limited fuel and weapons. Jessica checked her remaining ordnance. 1 AIM-120, 2 AIM-9 Sidewinders, and 511 rounds of 20mm ammunition. Thompson would have a similar loadout, assuming he hadn't expended everything on the northern threats. Viper 4, what's your fuel and weapons state? Showing 3,000 pounds of fuel, 1 AIM-120, 2 Sidewinders. Guns are full. Not enough for a prolonged engagement, but sufficient for one coordinated attack if they could achieve favorable geometry. Jessica began climbing toward Thompson's. Altitude, scanning the sky for the remaining 4 hostiles. Darkstar, Viper Flight. Status report on remaining threats. Viper Flight, Darkstar. We show 4 remaining southern contacts and 3 northern contacts still engaged with your other aircraft. Be advised, additional unidentified aircraft are approaching from the west. Jessica's blood went cold. More unknown aircraft meant this wasn't a limited probe or test of American defenses. Someone was conducting a major operation against one of the most secure military installations in the United States. Darkstar, how many additional contacts? Uncertain due to jamming, but preliminary count suggests 6 to 8 aircraft approaching. From bearing 270, 12 to 14 total hostiles against 8 Air Force F-16s, with half the American fighters already engaged and low on fuel. The tactical situation was rapidly deteriorating beyond anything Jessica had trained for. Viper 7, Viper 4, we need to link up with the rest of the flight before those western contacts arrive. Thompson was right. Fighting individually against superior numbers was a losing proposition. But as Jessica climbed toward his position, the 4 remaining southern hostiles began their own climb, apparently determined to prevent the 2 F-16s from rejoining the main battle. Viper 4, we've got company. 4 bandits climbing to intercept. Roger that. Let's take them head-on and punch through to the north. It was a desperate plan, but it might work. Jessica armed her remaining IM-120 and selected combat mode. On her radar, the ancient PG-66 began tracking the approaching hostiles, and for the first time in the engagement, she felt like she had a fair fight developing. Viper 7, Fox 1. She fired her last long-range missile at the lead enemy, then immediately turned to support Thompson's engagement with a second target. Viper 4, Fox 1. 2 AMRAMs guided toward their targets as the range closed rapidly. Jessica watched her missile track steadily toward the lead hostile, but at the last second, the unknown aircraft executed a maneuver she'd never seen before, a vertical climb, combined with a barrel roll that caused the AMRAAM to lose lock end. Self-destruct. Damn it, Viper 7 missed the leader. He's still in the fight. Thompson's missile found its target, adding a second fireball to the desert landscape. But now they were down to short-range weapons against 3 highly maneuverable opponents, who seemed to possess capabilities beyond current American technology. Viper 4, merge plot. Let's take this fight to the phone booth. As the 2 F-16s and 3 unknown aircraft closed for a close-range engagement, that would test everything Jessica had learned about air combat. She realized that her ancient fighter's greatest advantage wasn't its technology, it was the pilot, who'd learned to maximize every capability the old bird possessed. The merge happened at a combined closure rate of over 1,200 knots, 2 F-16s and 3 unknown aircraft passing through each other's formations in a deadly ballet that lasted mere seconds. Jessica pulled hard left as an enemy fighter flashed past her canopy, close enough to see details that made her question everything she thought she knew about the engagement. The aircraft bore no national markings, but its design was eerily familiar. Angular stealth features combined with aerodynamic efficiency that suggested American engineering. More disturbing was the cockpit, which appeared to be occupied by a human pilot wearing what looked like a standard flight helmet and oxygen mask. Viper 4, did you get a visual of those pilots? Jessica asked as she reversed her turn to re-engage. Affirmative. Viper 7, that's definitely human crew, not AI guidance. But the aircraft configuration doesn't match anything in our threat library. Jessica armed an AIM-9 Sidewinder and began tracking one of the hostiles as it maneuvered for position behind Thompson's F-16. The heat signature was wrong for any known foreign fighter, too clean, too advanced, suggesting propulsion technology. That was supposedly still in development. Viper 4, brake right. You've got a bandit on your 6. Thompson rolled into a defensive spiral, forcing the pursuing aircraft to overshoot and giving Jessica a perfect shot opportunity. She waited until the enemy was committed to its attack run, then fired. Viper 7, Fox 2. The Sidewinder guided. Flawlessly, its infrared seeker locked onto the enemy's heat signature. But at the last second, something impossible happened. The unknown aircraft deployed countermeasures that Jessica had never seen before, not standard flares or chaff, but some kind of directed energy burst that caused her missile to detonate prematurely. What the hell was that? Thompson's voice carried disbelief. That looked like a laser defense system. Before Jessica could respond, her RWR lit up with a new type of threat warning, one that shouldn't exist on any current aircraft. The symbol indicated an airborne directed energy weapon was painting her F-16 with targeting lasers. Viper 7, I'm being laced by some kind of DU system. These aren't foreign aircraft. This is technology that's at least 10 years ahead of anything publicly acknowledged. Viper 4 copies. We need to get out of here and report this to higher authority. But breaking contact wasn't an option. The remaining 2 hostiles had positioned themselves to block any escape route, and Jessica could see more aircraft approaching from the west, the additional wave that Darkstar had detected earlier. Darkstar, Viper 7, request immediate identification of approaching Western contacts. We're engaged with hostiles using advanced directed energy weapons. Viper 7, Darkstar. Stand by for... Wait, we're receiving a priority transmission from NORAD. All Viper aircraft are ordered to cease engagement and establish defensive cap over Nellis immediately. Jessica felt ice form in her stomach. NORAD involvement meant this incident had escalated far beyond a training exercise gone wrong. The North American Aerospace Defense Command only issued direct tactical orders during genuine national security. Threats: Darkstar, Viper 7, unable to comply with NORAD directive. We're currently engaged with hostiles and cannot break contact without significant risk. Viper 7, this is General Morrison. The commanding general's voice cut through the frequency with unmistakable authority. You are ordered to disengage immediately and return to base. This is a direct order from the highest levels of command. But as Jessica prepared to acknowledge the order, Thompson's voice crackled through her headset with information that changed everything. Viper 7, you need to see this. I'm getting IFF interrogation responses from the Western contacts. They're showing friendly codes. Identification friend or foe responses meant the approaching aircraft were transmitting codes indicating they were American military. But if friendly forces were approaching, why hadn't they been briefed about additional participants in the exercise? Viper 4, confirm IFF responses from Western contacts. Confirmed. Showing mode 4 friendly on 6 aircraft, bearing 270, range 30 miles. Jessica checked her own IFF interrogator and confirmed Thompson's reading. 6 American aircraft were approaching fast from the west, but their arrival coincided with the mysterious order to disengage from hostiles, who had attacked without warning and were using technology that shouldn't exist. Darkstar Viper 7. Request clarification on Western friendly contacts. Were they part of the planned exercise scenario? The silence that followed lasted too long. When the WACS controller finally responded, his voice carried a tension that hadn't been there before. Viper 7, Darkstar. We have no information on additional friendly participants. Stand by for updated instructions. That's when Jessica's worst suspicions were confirmed by an encrypted transmission on a frequency she wasn't supposed to monitor. Blackbird Flight, this is Control. Target packages are engaged with Red Team assets. Execute the recovery protocol immediately. The transmission lasted only seconds, but it revealed everything. Red Team meant adversary forces, and target packages could only refer to Viper Flight. Jessica and her classmates weren't facing foreign infiltrators. They were part of some kind of classified exercise involving American aircraft testing advanced weapons systems against operational F-16s. Viper 4, did you copy that transmission? Negative, Viper 7. What transmission? Jessica realized she was hearing communications on frequencies that her older F-16's radio equipment could receive, but newer systems filtered out. Her ancient radio, designed during an era of simpler communication protocols, was picking up classified traffic that her classmates couldn't monitor. Viper 7, this is Colonel Hayes. The squadron commander's voice carried urgency. I need you and Viper 4 to RTB immediately. We have information suggesting this entire engagement was a planned exercise that got out of hand. But Jessica knew better. The missiles that had nearly killed her classmates were real. The aircraft she'd been fighting were using technology decades ahead of acknowledged capabilities, and friendly forces were moving to recover the situation. This wasn't an exercise gone wrong. It was a test, and Viper Flight had been the unwitting subjects. Viper 4, we need to talk on a secure frequency, Jessica transmitted, switching to a tactical channel that would be harder to monitor. Go. Ahead, Viper 7. Jake, I think we've been set up. This whole thing is some kind of black program test, and we're the lab rats. What are you talking about? Think about it. 8 F-16s, mixed old and new equipment, facing off against advanced aircraft with capabilities that don't officially exist. Perfect test scenario for evaluating next-generation air combat systems. Against current inventory. Thompson was quiet for several seconds, processing the implications. When he responded, his voice carried the weight of understanding. Jesus, Jess, if you're right, then we've been fighting American pilots in American aircraft using classified technology. And now they're sending recovery forces to clean up the mess and probably debrief us under classification levels that will keep us quiet forever. Jessica checked her fuel gauge. Less than 1,500 pounds remaining, barely enough to reach base. Around her, the remaining hostile aircraft had stopped maneuvering aggressively and appeared to be withdrawing toward the approaching friendly forces. The engagement was ending, but not because either side had achieved victory. Viper 7, this is Blackbird Lead. A new voice entered the frequency, calm and professional. We're here to escort you safely home. Please maintain current heading and altitude. Blackbird Lead, Viper 7. Identify yourself and state your unit designation. Viper 7, that information is classified. Please comply with escort instructions. For your own safety. Jessica could see the approaching aircraft now. 6 F-35 Lightning II fighters in a loose formation. Their stealth profiles unmistakable even at distance. The most advanced fighters in the American inventory, equipped with sensors and weapon systems that made her F-16 seem prehistoric by comparison. Viper 4, Viper 7, those are F-35s approaching. This is definitely a controlled situation. Roger. That, so what do we do? We're low on fuel and outnumbered by aircraft that can kill us before we even know they're there. It was a fair question. Jessica's ancient F-16 had performed remarkably well against advanced adversaries, but the F-35s represented a level of technological superiority that couldn't be overcome by pilot skill alone. If the approaching fighters had hostile intent, resistance would be futile. Viper 7, Blackbird lead. You're ordered to follow us to a classified recovery facility. Any deviation from escort formation will be considered hostile action. The threat was clear but professionally delivered. Jessica was being ordered to land at a location she hadn't been briefed about by pilots she couldn't identify after participating in a combat engagement that officially never happened. Blackbird lead, Viper 7. Request confirmation of authority. For this directive, Viper 7, authority comes from levels above your clearance. Comply immediately. Jessica looked at her fuel gauge again and realized she had no real choice. Even if she wanted to resist, she lacked the fuel to reach an alternative landing site. But as the F-35s formed up around her ancient F-16, she made a decision that would define her future in military aviation. Viper 4, Viper 7. Whatever facility they're taking us to, whatever debriefing we're about to receive, remember everything. Every detail, every anomaly, every piece of evidence that this was a setup. Why? Because I think we just participated in something that's going to change air combat forever, and someone needs to make sure the operational community knows what's coming. As the formation of F-35s and F-16s turned toward an unknown destination, Jessica Rodriguez realized that her career as a conventional fighter pilot might be ending. But her role in the future of air warfare was just beginning. The ancient F-16 that everyone had mocked had proven itself against technology that shouldn't exist. And now she was about to discover exactly what that meant for American air power. The desert landscape passed below in silence as 6 of the world's most advanced fighters escorted 2 battle-tested F-16s toward a reckoning with classified programs and hidden agendas that would reshape everything Jessica thought she knew about serving her country. The classified facility materialized from the desert heat, shimmering like something from a fever dream. Groom Lake, Area 51, stretched before Jessica's F-16 as the formation descended toward the most secret runway in America. Even through her fuel emergency and the surreal circumstances, she felt a chill at seeing the legendary test site that officially didn't exist. Blackbird Flight Tower, cleared to land runway 14 left. Ground frequency will be provided after landing. Maintain radio silence until instructed otherwise. Jessica's fuel gauge showed 800 pounds remaining, enough for landing but not much else. Her ancient F-16 had flown beyond its normal limits today, pushed to performance levels that would have stressed much newer aircraft. As she configured for landing, she noticed unusual activity on the airfield below. Multiple aircraft types she'd never seen before sat in hardened shelters, their shapes hidden beneath specialized covers. Ground personnel moved with the purposeful efficiency of people working on projects that demanded absolute secrecy. Most disturbing were the wreckage recovery teams loading debris onto specialized trailers, debris that looked suspiciously like pieces from the aircraft she'd shot down earlier. Viper 7 Blackbird lead, after landing, taxied to the indicated marshalling area and shut down immediately. Ground personnel will escort you to the debriefing. The landing was routine despite Jessica's exhaustion and stress. Her F-16 touched down smoothly on the long runway that had seen test flights of every exotic aircraft America had developed since the 1950s. As she taxied toward the designated parking area, she noticed that Thompson's F-16 was being directed to a different location. Separated from her by several hundred yards, they're isolating us, she realized. Standard interrogation procedure. Separate the subjects to prevent coordination of stories and identify discrepancies in their accounts. Whatever debriefing awaited, it would be thorough and professionally conducted by people trained in extracting Information from military personnel. Viper 7, shut down engines and remain in the cockpit until escorted. A ground controller directed through her headset. Jessica completed her shutdown checklist methodically, but her mind was racing through implications and options. She was at the most classified facility in America, having participated in what appeared to be an unauthorized test program, with no way to contact outside authorities and no clear understanding of what would happen next. Two vehicles approached her aircraft, a standard crew van and a black SUV with tinted windows. The personnel who emerged wore flight suits without unit patches or name tags, a clear indication they were assigned to programs that required anonymity. One figure approached her cockpit with the confident bearing of senior military leadership. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, I'm Colonel Adams," the officer announced as Jessica opened her canopy. "Please step down from the aircraft and accompany us to debriefing. Your personal effects will be secured until the process is complete. Sir, I request clarification of my status. Am I under arrest or investigation? You're a participant in a classified program that requires thorough debriefing. Your cooperation is expected and appreciated." The careful phrasing told Jessica everything she needed to know. She wasn't technically under arrest, but refusing to cooperate wasn't really an option. As she climbed down from her F-16, she took one last look at the faithful aircraft that had carried her through the impossible engagement. The debriefing facility was a windowless, concrete building that could have been anywhere in the military-industrial complex. Jessica was escorted to a small room containing only a metal table, 2 chairs, and recording equipment that looked decidedly high-tech. Colonel Adams gestured for her to sit, then activated the recording system with a series of authorization codes. "This debriefing is classified top secret. Special access required. The information discussed cannot be shared with any person not specifically authorized for this program. Do you understand these restrictions?" "I understand the classification level, but I don't understand what program we're discussing. I participated in what I believed was a routine training exercise that was attacked by unknown aircraft." Colonel Adams opened a thick folder and spread several photographs across the table. Jessica recognized the images immediately, her F-16. Engaging the unknown aircraft, missile impacts, and clear shots of the wreckage she'd helped create. "Lieutenant, these photographs document your engagement with test aircraft from Project Ghostwriter, an advanced air combat development program. The aircraft you destroyed were prototypes worth approximately $400 million each." The number hit Jessica like a physical blow. $800 million in destroyed aircraft, and she was apparently responsible for half that total. But her tactical training kicked in, focusing on the information Colonel Adams had inadvertently revealed. "Sir, if these were test aircraft, why weren't Viper Flight briefed on their presence? And why did they engage us with live weapons? That's classified above your clearance level. What's important now is understanding exactly what happened from your perspective." For the next 2 hours, Colonel Adams walked Jessica through every detail of the engagement. Her radar contacts, defensive maneuvers, weapons employment, and tactical decisions were analyzed with forensic precision. The colonel seemed particularly interested in how her older F-16 had detected and engaged aircraft that were supposedly invisible to conventional radar systems. "Your APG-66 radar achieved multiple locks on aircraft specifically designed to defeat more advanced sensors. How do you explain this capability?" "The older radar operates on different frequencies and uses mechanical scanning rather than electronic beam steering. It's possible the stealth technology was optimized to defeat newer systems, but didn't account for legacy radar characteristics." Colonel Adams made detailed notes, clearly understanding the implications. Jessica's ancient radar had accidentally revealed a vulnerability in America's most advanced stealth technology, a flaw that could be exploited by adversaries using older systems. "Lieutenant, I need to inform you that your participation in today's events has created a significant security situation. Project Ghost Rider aircraft were exposed to operational F-16 squadrons without proper authorization, resulting in the loss of classified technology and potential compromise of advanced capabilities. Sir, are you saying this whole thing was unauthorized? I'm saying that certain elements of the program exceeded their authority in designing today's test scenario. The decision to use live weapons and engage operational aircraft without full command authorization has created serious legal and security implications. Jessica felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She wasn't just a participant in a classified test. She was apparently a witness to unauthorized use of experimental weapons against operational military aircraft. The implications were staggering. What happens to me now? Colonel Adams closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. That depends on several factors, Lieutenant. Your cooperation with this investigation, your understanding of the classification requirements, and your willingness to accept reassignment to support the Ghost Rider program. Reassignment? Your performance today demonstrated capabilities that make you valuable to advanced aircraft development. The program can use pilots who understand how to maximize older systems and think tactically rather than relying purely on technology. Jessica realized she was being recruited or coerced into joining the very program that had used her as an unwitting test subject. The offer came with implicit threats about what would happen if she refused to cooperate. What about Thompson? And the rest of Viper Flight? Lieutenant Thompson is undergoing similar debriefing. The other pilots will receive appropriate classification briefings and return to normal duties. Their participation was limited and their exposure to sensitive information was minimal. And if I refuse this opportunity? Colonel Adams's expression hardened slightly. Lieutenant, you've been exposed to information and capabilities that are vital to national security. Refusing to support the program that protects those capabilities would raise questions about your reliability and commitment to your oath as an Air Force officer. The threat was clear without being explicit. Cooperate or face career destruction, possibly worse. Jessica had stumbled into a world where normal military regulations and procedures were subordinated to program requirements and classified objectives. I need time to consider this offer. You have until 0800 tomorrow morning. Your aircraft will remain here for technical analysis, and you'll be billeted in secure quarters tonight. I recommend you use that time to carefully consider your future. As guards escorted Jessica to a small room that was clearly designed for detaining people, rather than hosting them, she realized the full scope of her situation. She was effectively a prisoner at the most classified facility in America, being pressured to join a program that had used her and her classmates as unwitting test subjects, with no way to contact outside authorities or legal counsel. Her room had no windows, no telephone, and a door that locked from the outside. A small television offered only military training channels and base information broadcasts. Jessica sat on the narrow bed and tried to process everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. She had started the day as a struggling flight school student flying an obsolete F-16 that everyone mocked. Now she was at Area 51, having destroyed $400 million worth of experimental aircraft, facing recruitment into a black program that operated outside normal military authority. The irony wasn't lost on her. The ancient F-16 that everyone had dismissed as a liability had performed better than anyone expected, revealing vulnerabilities in the most advanced stealth technology and demonstrating that older systems still had tactical value, but instead of being celebrated for her performance, she was being coerced into silence and compliance. As night fell over the Nevada desert, Jessica Rodriguez sat in her secure quarters and realized that tomorrow morning's decision would determine not just her career, but possibly her freedom and her life. The girl who had been laughed at for flying a museum piece was now the center of a classified program that could reshape American air power if she survived long enough to influence its direction. Jessica woke at 0430 hours, her internal clock calibrated by years of military discipline. The secure quarters remained windowless and sterile, but her mind had been working through the night, processing options and calculating possibilities. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. When you can't change the game, you change how you play it. She had 3.5 hours before Colonel Adams expected her decision, but Jessica had realized something during her sleepless night. The Ghost Rider program needed her more than she needed them, and they had inadvertently given her leverage by revealing the extent of their security breach. At 0600, she pressed the call button that summoned her escorts. When the guards arrived, Jessica was already dressed and ready. I need to speak with Colonel Adams immediately. I have information about the Ghost Rider vulnerabilities that require urgent attention. Ma'am, the Colonel isn't available until 0800. Then get someone who is available. The radar signature analysis I conducted yesterday reveals systematic flaws in your stealth technology that foreign adversaries could exploit using readily available equipment. The guards exchanged glances. Jessica was betting that the magic words foreign adversaries and systematic flaws would get attention from someone with authority to make decisions. 20 minutes later, she was escorted to a different building entirely. This facility hummed with activity, even at dawn. Technicians analyzing data, engineers reviewing telemetry, and senior officers coordinating damage assessment from yesterday's engagement. The air crackled with the urgent energy of a program in crisis. Lieutenant Rodriguez. The voice belonged to Brigadier General Patricia Hawkins, a woman whose reputation in the test pilot community was legendary. I understand you have concerns about our operational security. General, with respect, I have solutions to your operational security problems. But first, I need clarification about my legal status and the authority under which this program operates. General Hawkins studied Jessica with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating pilots under pressure. Lieutenant, you're not under arrest or investigation. You're a witness to classified activities who possess specialized knowledge. That's vital to national security. And if I choose not to share that knowledge, then you'll be transferred to a position where your expertise can't benefit potential adversaries. Somewhere isolated, with limited access to operational intelligence. The threat was more sophisticated than Colonel Adams's crude coercion, but it was still a threat. Jessica decided to play her strongest card. Generally, I recorded yesterday's engagement using my helmet camera system. The recordings include radar scope imagery showing exactly how legacy systems can defeat Ghost Rider's stealth technology. That footage is automatically uploaded to secure servers that your program doesn't control. It was a complete bluff. Jessica's F-16 wasn't equipped with helmet cameras, and she had no access to external servers. But the lie served its purpose. General Hawkins's expression shifted from confident authority to genuine concern. Explain. Modern F-16s have standardized recording systems that your people would know how to locate and control. But my aircraft uses older equipment that interfaces with systems your technical teams haven't considered. The data exists, and it's beyond your immediate reach. Jessica watched General Hawkins process the implications. If recordings of the engagement existed outside program control, they represented a massive security breach. Foreign intelligence services would pay enormous sums for detailed analysis of how legacy radar systems could defeat American stealth technology. What do you want, Lieutenant? I want the truth about yesterday's engagement. Full disclosure about program authorization, command structure, and the decision-making process that led to live weapons employment against operational aircraft. That information is compartmentalized above your clearance level. Then get me the clearance, Or find someone who's willing to explain why American pilots were ordered to shoot down other American pilots without proper authorization. The standoff lasted several tense seconds before General Hawkins made a decision that surprised Jessica. Very well. But this conversation requires the presence of program oversight personnel. An hour later, Jessica found herself in a conference room with some of the most senior officers she'd ever encountered. General Hawkins had been joined by two other generals, a civilian who introduced himself only as Mr. Davidson from the Office of Special Programs, and a stern woman who carried herself with the unmistakable bearing of intelligence community. Leadership. Lieutenant Rodriguez, Mr. Davidson began. Project Ghostwriter represents 5 years of development and $12 billion in investment. The aircraft you engaged yesterday were prototypes of the next-generation air superiority fighter, designed to maintain American technological advantage for the next 30 years. Sir, if that's true, why weren't operational squadrons briefed about their existence? And why did they engage us with live weapons? The intelligence officer, who had identified herself only as Ms. Chun, answered with clinical precision. The engagement scenario was designed to test Ghostwriter capabilities against current inventory aircraft under realistic conditions. Previous simulations had proven inadequate for evaluating true performance parameters. Jessica felt her anger rising. You used my squadron as unwitting test subjects in a live-fire exercise. We used volunteer military personnel in a classified training scenario with appropriate safety protocols. Appropriate safety protocols? You shot real missiles at us. General Hawkins intervened before the confrontation could escalate further. Lieutenant, the exercise parameters included specific engagement rules and weapons limitations designed to minimize risk while providing realistic test conditions. General, with respect, your safety protocols nearly killed 6 American pilots. Captain Morrison's aircraft took damage from missile fragmentation. Lieutenant Chun's F-16 suffered hydraulic system failures from evasive maneuvering at unsafe altitudes. And you lost 2 prototype aircraft worth $400 million each. The room fell silent as Jessica's tactical analysis hit home. She had been paying attention during the engagement, noting details that revealed the true cost of the unauthorized test. Furthermore, Jessica continued, pressing her advantage, the engagement revealed critical vulnerabilities in Ghostwriter stealth, technology that foreign adversaries could exploit using equipment available on the international arms market. Mr. Davidson leaned forward with obvious interest. Explain these vulnerabilities. The Ghostwriter aircraft are optimized to defeat X-band and Q-band radar systems used by modern fighters. But they show significant signature spikes when illuminated by older L-band and S-band systems operating with mechanical beam steering rather than electronic scanning. Jessica was drawing on technical knowledge, absorbed from years of listening to her father discuss radar systems with other maintenance technicians. The older PG-66 radar in her F-16 operated on frequencies and used techniques that knew her stealth. Technology hadn't been designed to counter. Any nation with access to 1980s-era radar technology could potentially detect and track Ghostwriter aircraft at tactically significant ranges. She continued, that includes most of our potential adversaries, many of whom still operate Soviet-era systems that use exactly those frequency bands. The implications were staggering. If Jessica was correct, the $12 billion Ghostwriter program had a fundamental flaw that could be exploited by countries using obsolete equipment. How confident are you in this assessment? Ms. Chun asked. Confident enough to prove it under controlled conditions, assuming you're willing to risk another prototype. Aircraft. General Hawkins exchanged glances with the other officials before responding. What exactly are you proposing? A properly authorized test engagement between a Ghostwriter aircraft and legacy radar systems. Full telemetry, controlled conditions, and official documentation of results. If I'm wrong, you can proceed with the program as designed. If I'm right, you need to address the vulnerability before full-scale production. And in exchange for this demonstration, Jessica took a deep breath before making the request that would define her future. I want command of the test program. That evaluates Ghost Rider capabilities against legacy threats. Full authority to design scenarios, select participating aircraft, and publish findings to the operational community. The audacity of a lieutenant demanding command authority over $1 billion program brought stunned silence to the room. Jessica was asking for unprecedented responsibility, but she was also offering a solution to their most serious security problem. "Lieutenant," Mr. Davidson said carefully, "that level of authority typically requires years of experience and significant security clearances." "Sir, I just demonstrated that experience and security clearances don't guarantee understanding of how weapon systems actually perform in combat. Yesterday's engagement proved that assuming technological superiority can be dangerous when facing opponents who understand how to exploit system limitations." Ms. Chun spoke up with clinical assessment. "The lieutenant's proposal has merit. Her tactical performance yesterday exceeded all modeling predictions, and her analysis of Ghost Rider vulnerabilities is technically sound. Granting her oversight authority would ensure the program benefits from her unique expertise." General Hawkins considered the proposal with the calculating mind of a test pilot evaluating risk versus reward. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, what you're requesting is essentially a blank check to challenge every assumption underlying the most expensive fighter program in Air Force history. General, what I'm requesting is the opportunity to make sure that program actually works when it faces real threats instead of theoretical opponents." The negotiation continued for another hour, with Jessica gradually extracting concessions that transformed her from unwilling participant to program architect. She would be promoted to major and granted special access clearances. Her F-16 would be modified with advanced sensors while retaining its legacy radar systems. Most importantly, she would have authority to recruit pilots and aircraft for realistic testing scenarios. "There is one final condition," General Hawkins announced as the meeting concluded. "Everything you've learned about Ghost Rider capabilities and limitations remains compartmentalized. Public disclosure could compromise national security and endanger the pilots who will eventually fly these aircraft operationally." "Understood, General, but I have one condition of my own." "What's that?" "Lieutenant Thompson gets full disclosure and the opportunity to join the program. He proved himself yesterday. And I'll need pilots I can trust for the testing scenarios we're going to conduct." As Jessica left the conference room with a tablet computer containing preliminary program briefings and access codes, she reflected on how completely her situation had reversed. 12 hours earlier, she had been a prisoner facing career destruction. Now she was Major Designate Rodriguez, commanding a test program that would evaluate the future of American air power. Her ancient F-16 had proven that sometimes the biggest disadvantage could become an unexpected advantage. Now she had the opportunity to ensure that lesson was applied to protect pilots who would face real threats with real consequences. The girl everyone had laughed at for flying a museum piece was about to reshape how the Air Force thought about air combat for the next generation. 6 months later, Major Jessica Rodriguez stood on the observation deck at Edwards Air Force Base, watching her carefully orchestrated aerial ballet unfold in the clear California sky. Below her, 16 aircraft participated in the most comprehensive air combat evaluation in Air Force history, a test scenario that would fundamentally change how America approached fighter aircraft development for decades to come. Dragon Flight. This is Control. You are cleared to engage designated targets using all available sensors and weapons systems. Exercises live. Repeat. Exercises live. Jessica keyed her headset microphone, transmitting on a frequency that reached pilots she had personally selected from across the Air Force. Dragonflight, this is Overwatch. Remember your briefings. Today we prove that understanding your equipment is more important than having the newest gadgets. The formation spread across the test range included an extraordinary mix of aircraft. Her own F-16 Block 25, now modified with advanced recording systems while retaining its original APG-66 radar, led a flight of deliberately mismatched fighters. Major Jake Thompson flew a Block 30 F-16 with upgraded avionics but original radar systems. Captain Maria Santos, recruited from the aggressor squadron, piloted an F-15C that had been specifically modified to replicate foreign radar capabilities. Even more unusual was Captain David Park's F-5 Tiger II, an aircraft so old it predated most stealth technology by 2 decades. Opposing them were 4 Ghost Rider prototypes, now officially designated F-40 Lightning III, along with 2 F-35s and an experimental unmanned combat air vehicle that represented the cutting edge of autonomous fighter technology. The Blue Team represented over $20 billion in advanced aerospace engineering, equipped with sensors that could detect and track targets at ranges exceeding 150 miles. Control Dragon Lead, Jessica transmitted. Commencing approach to initial engagement zone. All flights confirm weapons safe, sensors active, full defensive systems online. What followed was unlike any air combat exercise previously conducted by the United States Air Force. Instead of the traditional scenarios that pitted similar aircraft against each other, Jessica had designed a test that specifically evaluated how legacy systems performed against advanced threats under realistic conditions. Dragon 2, contact bearing 045 68 miles. Thompson reported from his F-16. Looks like they're trying to bracket us from the north. Dragon 3, I'm painting multiple contacts, but they keep fading in and out, Captain. Santos called from her F-15. These stealth birds are good, but they're not invisible to everything. Jessica smiled as she monitored the engagement developing below. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of testing, analysis, and gradual revelation of just how much the defense establishment had overlooked in their pursuit of technological supremacy. Her initial assessment of Ghost Rider vulnerabilities had proven accurate, but the implications went far beyond a single aircraft program. Dragon 4 has solid contact on the Eastern Group, Captain Park reported from his ancient F-5. They're definitely not optimized to hide from 1970s radar technology. The F-5's PQ-159 radar was so old it used vacuum tubes instead of solid-state electronics, but its unique operating characteristics allowed it to detect stealth aircraft that were invisible to modern sensors. Jessica had discovered that stealth technology was largely calibrated to defeat the specific threat systems that potential adversaries were known to possess, but older American equipment often operated outside those parameters. Overwatch this is Blue Leader, came the transmission from the opposing force commander. Flying the lead F-40, we're showing intermittent radar contact with your legacy aircraft. Our systems were not designed to engage targets with these signature characteristics. That was exactly what Jessica had hoped to hear. The most advanced fighters in the world were struggling to effectively engage aircraft that were considered obsolete by conventional standards. But the real test was yet to come. Dragonflight, weapons-free. Commence engagement according to briefed parameters. The battle that followed revolutionized air combat doctrine in ways that would influence fighter design for the next century. Jessica's F-16, using tactics developed over months of analysis, demonstrated that legacy radar systems could not only detect stealth aircraft but could guide weapons effectively against them. Her ancient APG-66 achieved multiple simulated kills against F-40s that couldn't accurately locate her aircraft. Dragon Lead, Fox 1. Jessica called as she fired a simulated IM-12 at the lead Ghost Rider, via MRA AIM Seeker head guided by her older radar. achieved lock and tracked steadily toward its target, despite the F-40's sophisticated countermeasures. Blue leader is defending, came the frustrated response as the F-40 pilot executed defensive maneuvers that would have defeated any conventional threat. But Jessica's missile simulation continued tracking, demonstrating that stealth technology optimized for defeating modern threats could be vulnerable to weapons guided by older systems. The exercise continued for 47 minutes, producing tactical data that would reshape American air power strategy. When the final scores were tallied, Jessica's deliberately mismatched force had achieved a kill ratio of 2.3 to 1 against the most advanced aircraft in the American inventory. All aircraft, this is control. Exercise complete. RTB for immediate debriefing. As the formation headed back to Edwards, Jessica reflected on how completely her world had changed since that morning at Nellis when everyone had mocked her ancient F-16. She was now Major Rodriguez, commanding the Adaptive Combat Evaluation Program, the most influential air combat development initiative in the Air Force. Her insights had not only saved the Ghost Rider program from a fatal flaw, but had fundamentally altered how the military thought about technological superiority. The debriefing facility at Edwards buzzed with activity as engineers, analysts, and senior officers processed the mountain of data generated by the exercise. Jessica entered the main briefing room to find an audience that included some of the most senior leadership in the Air Force, along with representatives from Congress, the Pentagon, and major defense contractors. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Patricia Hawkins announced as Jessica approached the podium, "Major Rodriguez will present the findings from today's evaluation and their implications for future air combat development." Jessica activated the presentation system, displaying tactical diagrams that showed the engagement geometry and weapons effectiveness data. Today's exercise confirmed that our pursuit of technological superiority has created unexpected vulnerabilities that potential adversaries could exploit using readily available equipment. The first slide showed radar detection ranges, with legacy systems achieving contact at distances that should have been impossible against stealth aircraft. The F-40 Lightning III is optimized to defeat X-band and Ku-band radars operating with electronic beam steering. However, L-band and S-band systems using mechanical scanning can achieve detection and tracking at tactically significant ranges. Murmurs rippled through the audience as the implications became clear. Foreign nations operating older Soviet-era radar systems would potentially be able to detect and engage America's most advanced fighters using equipment that was considered obsolete. Furthermore, Jessica continued, advancing to the next slide, legacy aircraft equipped with older missile systems can achieve successful engagements against stealth targets because their guidance systems operate outside the parameters that countermeasures are designed to defeat. She clicked a video clip showing her F-16 simulated missile engagement with the F-40. This IM-120 was guided by an PG-66 radar, using techniques that haven't been employed operationally for 15 years. The target aircraft's defensive systems were calibrated for modern threats and proved inadequate against this older guidance methodology. The silence in the room was profound as senior officers grappled with the realization that billions of dollars in advanced aircraft might be vulnerable to threats they had never considered. "The solution," Jessica announced, moving to her recommendations slide, "is not to abandon advanced technology, but to ensure that our systems are tested against the full spectrum of potential threats, including legacy equipment that adversaries might employ." She outlined a comprehensive testing protocol that would evaluate all future aircraft designs against deliberately obsolete radar and weapon systems. "We need to assume that our enemies will study our capabilities and employ whatever systems prove most effective, regardless of their technological sophistication." The presentation continued for another 30 minutes, with Jessica detailing specific modifications to aircraft design requirements, testing protocols, and operational tactics. Her recommendations would require fundamental changes to how the defense industry approached fighter development, but the alternative was fielding aircraft with exploitable vulnerabilities. Major Rodriguez, interrupted Senator Patricia Williams, chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, are you suggesting that we should continue operating older aircraft alongside our advanced systems? Senator, I'm suggesting that we should understand the tactical value of mixed-generation equipment and ensure our pilots are trained to exploit every available advantage, regardless of the age of their systems. The question and answer session that followed revealed the extent to which Jessica's analysis had challenged conventional wisdom about air combat. Defense contractors expressed concern about the cost implications of redesigning stealth technology. Pentagon officials worried about the strategic impact of revealing American vulnerabilities. Congressional representatives demanded assurance that taxpayer investments in advanced aircraft would prove effective in actual combat. Jessica addressed each concern with the technical expertise she had developed over months of intensive study and analysis. Her father's lessons about understanding equipment limitations had evolved into a comprehensive philosophy about the relationship between technology and tactical effectiveness. The fundamental issue, she explained to a question about pilot training, is that we've become so focused on technological superiority that we've forgotten the importance of pilot skill and tactical creativity. Advanced systems are force multipliers, but they can't replace sound tactical thinking and thorough understanding of equipment capabilities. After the formal briefing concluded, Jessica found herself surrounded by senior officers, defense contractors, and policymakers who wanted detailed discussions about implementing her recommendations. The girl who had been mocked for flying an obsolete F-16 was now the center of conversations about reshaping American air power for the next generation. Major Rodriguez, General Robert Morrison, approached with an expression that mixed professional respect with personal complexity. His son Derek had completed fighter training and was now assigned to an F-22 squadron, but Jessica's success had fundamentally altered the Morrison family's understanding of what constituted excellence in military aviation. General Morrison: Sir, I owe you an apology. 6 months ago, I ordered you to stand down from an engagement that you understood better than anyone in the command structure. Your tactical judgment was superior to mine, and your analysis potentially saved American lives. The apology was unexpected and professionally significant. General Morrison's acknowledgement represented validation from the highest levels of command that Jessica's unconventional approach had proven correct. Sir, I was just doing my job as I understood it. No, Major, you were thinking beyond your job to consider implications that more senior officers missed. That's the kind of leadership the Air Force needs for the challenges we're facing. As the crowd gradually dispersed, Jessica found herself alone with Major Thompson, who had become her closest collaborator in developing the new testing protocols. So what's next, Jess? We've proven that old equipment can surprise new systems. We've changed how the Air Force thinks about fighter development, and you've gone from flight school washout candidate to one of the most influential officers in air combat development. Jessica looked out the window at the flight line where her modified F-16 sat among the most advanced aircraft in the world. The contrast was still striking, but now it represented capability rather than inadequacy. Next, we implement these changes across the entire combat air force. Every pilot needs to understand that their mission effectiveness depends on maximizing their equipment's capabilities rather than envying someone else's technology. And personally, what's next for Major Jessica Rodriguez? Jessica smiled, thinking about the opportunities that lay ahead. She had been offered positions with major defense contractors, advanced degree programs at prestigious universities, and command assignments that would put her on track for general officer rank. But her Decision had been made months earlier, during those first conversations with General Hawkins about program oversight. I'm staying right here, continuing to test the assumptions that guide American air power. Someone needs to make sure we're preparing for the threats we'll actually face rather than the ones we expect to face. 3 months later, Jessica stood once again on an observation deck, this time at Nellis Air Force Base, where a new class of fighter pilots was beginning the same advanced training program she had completed a year earlier. Below her, a mixed formation of F-16s prepared for takeoff, including several deliberately older aircraft that were now considered essential for realistic threat evaluation. The newest pilot in the program was a young lieutenant, flying an F-16A that had been pulled from storage and restored specifically for legacy systems training. Like Jessica's aircraft a year earlier, it looked worn and obsolete compared to the sleek modern fighters around it. But now that perception was considered an advantage rather than a liability. Dragonflight, this is Tower. You're cleared for takeoff. Contact departure control on frequency 253.4. As the formation lifted off into the Nevada sky, Jessica reflected on how completely the perception of her old F-16 had changed. The aircraft that everyone had mocked was now the template for a new approach to air combat development. Museums around the country were requesting similar aircraft for display, not as relics of past wars, but as examples of equipment that had revealed critical flaws in the most advanced military technology ever developed. Her personal transformation had been equally dramatic. The lieutenant who had been dismissed as an underperformer was now Major Rodriguez, director of the Adaptive Combat Evaluation Program, author of the Rodriguez Doctrine on Next-Generation Air Combat, and one of the youngest officers ever to receive the Mach Trophy for contributions to aerospace development. But perhaps most importantly, she had proven something that her grandfather would have understood, that skill, determination, and thorough understanding of your equipment could overcome almost any technological disadvantage. The ancient F-16 that everyone had laughed at had intercepted 6 hostile aircraft, not despite its age, but because of the unique capabilities that came with its legacy systems. As Jessica prepared to leave the observation deck, her radio crackled with a transmission from the training flight. Dragon lead, this is Dragon 7, first time flying the legacy bird. And I have to say, this old girl has some surprises in her systems. Jessica smiled, keying her microphone to respond. Dragon 7, this is Overwatch. Remember that every disadvantage can become an advantage if you understand how to use it properly. Your mission is to prove that the aircraft doesn't make the pilot makes the aircraft. The response came back immediately, filled with the confidence that came from understanding rather than assumption. Copy that, Overwatch. Dragon 7 is ready to show what an old fighter and a determined pilot can accomplish. As the formation disappeared into the desert sky, Jessica Rodriguez walked back to her office, where the walls were lined with technical manuals, tactical analyses, and photographs documenting the transformation of American air combat doctrine. In the center of it all sat a scale model of her F-16C Block 25, the ancient fighter that had changed everything. She had started as the girl everyone laughed at for flying a rusty helicopter that turned out to be the only one that could fly. Now she was the woman who had proven that sometimes the oldest solutions were the newest innovations, and that understanding your equipment was more powerful than having the latest technology. The legacy would continue with every pilot who learned to maximize their aircraft's capabilities rather than making excuses for its limitations. And somewhere in the Nevada desert, an old F-16 continued to fly, carrying forward the lesson that had reshaped American air power. That experience, skill, and determination would always matter more than the date on the manufacturing tag. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.